Hey there guys, I'm going to do a walkthrough today on Outgrowth. I'm not going to go into everything about this app, but I'm going to cover most of the interesting things, I think. So this is available for desktop and iOS by Aqeel Aadam and BlankFor.ms. It's basically a really cool little sampler app. I'm really enjoying this. In the video, I will make a few observations, some things I've noticed that I think could be improved, but I like it for sure. So let's just stop this a second. So I sampled that in from Piano Tech, Singular, this Night Call preset, right? Now that's the original preset. Now the thing is, Piano Tech is not MPE, right? But this is MPE, and this particular patch at the moment that I've got loaded is not an MPE patch, but I'll let you hear later me playing it in a way that's more MPE, so that's nice. Now though, we do have other things on iOS, for example, that are MPE samplers like Salome, but these have different features. So I don't think that if you have Salome, it means you don't need to buy this. Definitely not. This definitely has some cool stuff. So we take a little look in this video at the main features. So the interesting thing really is that it has these 5 different engines, right? Stem, traditional playback mode that repitches samples. Okay, so this one here is just your typical sample player, and like, let me take this off. I'm using Spacewalk here, by the way, to play this. So let me just use the keyboard in AUM instead. So if you see here, I'm playing a D there on the 3rd octave. And if I play that up, it's gonna be twice the speed, right? And that's gonna be twice the speed again, right? So that's a very basic thing there. But what's interesting here is that if we change the start and the end positions, we can get it to play backwards, right? And, you know, obviously we can adjust those start and end positions if we want. Now, then we have this one, Retain. Uses granular synthesis to sustain samples indefinitely within user-determined bounds. So do you see now this part here is being sustained? And so I can adjust things here like the playback start, the window width, and the grain count. Let's just turn this one up a bit, it's not so loud. So if I put the playback start somewhere in here, it'll just ignore that entirely. Window start, you know, we could put that up here if we wanted. Right? And then we can change the window width, right? Sorry, that was the playback I brought back there. Yeah. Grain count. No, one thing, by the way, and this is a limitation. This app, I would like it if you could load it in an effect slot, right? Why? Well, obviously because I'd like to sample directly into it, but it does not appear as it's not set up to do that. So to get this sample into this, I had to, play. I had to play a note here. I played a C3 or a C4, I can't remember, and I just recorded it using my host here, in this case AUM, and then that was saved to files, and then in Outgrowth, you know, I went into samples and added sample and found it in my files and so on. That is not as convenient a workflow as I would like. I have mentioned this to the developer and he said it's a bit difficult to implement that. Let's see, though, maybe he will, but that's worth mentioning. So that's retain and then reflect. And maybe let's just get this playing here. So this one, reflect, repeatedly plays back a section of a sample. Whoops, wrong thing playing there. Repeatedly plays back a section of a sample for rhythmic or pulsing outputs. This one's really nice. And you see here the length changes depending on the pitch to make sure that all the loops will sound the same length. Let's just demo it with the keyboard. So here I'm going to play a C3. And note that I've got this set to ping pong there, right? So it's going forwards and backwards. Do you see the way it adjusted the end point there? Now we also have a time thing here I can adjust. And we have synced or seconds lengths. Okay. We can adjust the start point and stuff like that. So we also have just forwards, put the length up a bit higher, put it to 1/4 of a bar, forward, and reverse mode. It's probably nice, faster. There's the ping pong. So let me just load this again. Lovely. Now we'll look at these other controls later after we've looked at the engines. Radiate, this one, constructs an additive synthesizer via sine wave partials assigned to the primary frequencies within the sample. Sounds kind of similar, yeah. So the exact sound is going to depend on what you do with these partials, and also you can set up cross modulation between the partials. So here we're just dialing in how many partials we've got from 1, although cross mod also works when you've got it in 1, so can self-modulate, I guess. From 1 up to 25. Now be careful with this one. I found that this can get very loud. A few times when I was playing around with this, I went into the red, and it's not good for my headphones. So either, be very cautious with your volume levels, be conservative, or put a limiter or something after this maybe. If you're, experimenting with it, at least until you get more familiar with it maybe. Hang on. Are we hearing both those? No. Okay, good. So that's with no cross modulation. See? It's much more interesting, this one, with a bit of cross mod. Now, obviously, we can change the sound of this with other stuff like the filter and these other different things that we'll look at over here. I'm just going to load this preset again. And next one, hang on, did we do reflect? Rhythmic or pulsing out? I think we did do that one, didn't we? Yeah. Yeah, we did, yeah. Okay, delve. This one's kind of cool as well. So turns the sample into a wavetable oscillator. Now what we got going on here is very simple, right? But it sounds nice. And so we got start point here. And we can bring in this lovely sounding sub-oscillator. Now, by the way, I like this. I mean, first of all, we've got an ADSR over here, but you also have these very handy little controls to just quickly push the ADSR sliders into certain shapes. So this one's handy for plucks, right? And now keys and pads. And just a flat one, right? Now, as I mentioned, you can also use this MPE. So if we tap the cog here, it opens up some additional controls. And so here we have MPE control, right? So I've got a preset that I saved already, actually, MPE. So singular MPE version, pressure to volume, I called it. So here I'm going to press load with samples. Doesn't actually matter as it's using the same sample anyway, but yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to play this with an MPE keyboard. So here I'm going to use Salome to play this. And I have to deal with this very annoying behavior of Salome. So hang on, it doesn't seem like that modulation was saved there. Let me see. Maybe I forgot to save it. Don't know. I'm pretty sure that I had MPE pressure connected, but okay, let me just show you how to do this. So what I want to do here is I want to map. So see here we've got pitch bend already, right? We've got per note pitch bend already. So you know here, when I play the right note, I'm able to adjust its pitch without adjusting the pitch of this note. I'm not moving my finger on that one. So we've enabled the MPE pitch bend already, but what I want to do is use MPE pressure to control the volume. In Salome, MPE pressure is just mapped to movements on the y-axis. So what we do here, now we can tap here. We can tap here on add destination, right? And it'll open something up. But what I'm generally doing is just pressing here, drag to assign, right? So I press here and drag it over to volume, right? So I'm going to assign it to volume. And then what I'm going to do also is, let me take a look at this. Because velocity, if you see, velocity is already assigned to volume. And I want to turn that off actually here. So let me X that. Hang on, did that? It's just a little bit funny when I switch from mouse to finger. Okay, so velocity is off. So now if you see here, when I press here, okay, I gotta adjust the amount. Hang on. So MPE pressure. Okay, so the default is 10%. So let's put it up. I'm just dragging it up. Okay, you drag up or down for negative or positive amount. So I've dragged it up to 100%, okay? And so now when I put my finger near the bottom, take a look at the volume knob here and see how that'll increase as I drag up there and go all the way up to the top eventually, right? So now we've got something, you know, more expressive because every time I jiggle up and down on this key, I'm controlling the velocity. And so, of course, you could assign that MPE pressure to anything. One thing I will mention is CC74 is another very important control for MPE. And in this, we do have a way to assign MIDI CCs, but when I tried assigning CC74 and tried using an MPE controller, sending CC74 messages, it wasn't acting per note. It might have been user error, but I don't think so. I did report this to Aqeel, and I don't know, he's looking into it but didn't get back to me. But it seems to me that this is only set up for MPE pressure. It doesn't seem to be set up for CC74. I might be wrong, but that's the way it seems to me. And that's something that should be easy to change anyway. You can also use different little MIDI tools and things to convert messages. For example, you could use on iOS a free app called Stream Biter to do that sort of thing. So yeah, so anyway, it has that MPE, right, which is nice. We'll talk a bit more about the modulation in general later. But right now, I'm just going to switch it back to this basic Piano Tech Singular one. So I've got a choice, I can load it, just the preset settings, or I can load it with samples. I'm going to load with samples. This doesn't seem to be responding to mouse. Don't know. It responded fine when I tapped it with my finger just now. I'm using a trackpad so you can see what I'm doing. I'm using the iPad, right? If I didn't use a trackpad, you wouldn't have any indicator here on the screen. It'd be hard for you to see what I'm doing. So let's just jump back to getting this played by a bit of MIDI. And let's look at these little controls here. These are interesting. This is where it starts to get really cool. So look at that. So if I bring this all the way up, it's made the loud parts quiet and the quiet parts loud, right? This is just like heavy compression, everything's sort of same volume. And that's our normal sample there. I really like playing with that. And that's going to be lovely to modulate for sure, that control, right? Now this one here will do a few things to make it behave a little bit more like an acoustic instrument. It's some stuff to do with the EQing and things, but also make it act a little bit more like a piano. And what you'll notice is it feels more like playing a piano, where the lower notes are panned to the left, right? Because if you're sitting in front of a piano, those low notes are down to the left of the keyboard, right? And the higher notes are panned more towards the right. And so that again, is normal if you're sitting in front of an instrument like a piano. And then there's this one called Submerge. So this one, it says in the manual something like it adds consistency when repitching the samples. Does some kind of filtering notes. And that does have a sort of underwater vibe, doesn't it? Yeah. And be different from just using the filter over here. Although a bit similar, actually, to be honest. So the filter, by the way, if you tap here, you have a few different controls: resonance, key track, envelope, and feedback. Oh, there you see, that's got a little bit of glitching sound there. Must have had a spike. We can key track it. So depending on how high or low your note is, modulate the filter with that. Connect it to how loud the sound is. It's also got this little control called feedback. Can't remember what that one does, actually. It's there in the manual. Nice. So you have a choice between a low pass and a high pass there, by the way. And so then we get into this one, which is pretty cool. Ripple. This is a kind of tape effect. and can go very lo-fi when you push it all the way up. Or, you know, just dial in a little bit of like a sort of wow and flutter type thing. And this one, smear, is interesting. And this adds a reverb before the envelope. Whoa, I get a little bit of glitching there again. So then we have modulation, right? So I've set up one version of this with modulation. So as you can see, yeah, a bit of modulation going on. So if I tap here on modulation, we can see what I've set up. And we can see what controls there are. So I haven't really set up all that much here. But let's just take a little look. So the LFO is modulating the start time and the window length over there. And we can change the length of that LFO. And this morph basically changes the shape. So it's not a traditional sort of LFO where you're just picking from a bunch of waveforms like sine, triangle, and so on. Now, there's another thing here then, jitter. This is like a sort of random walk type thing. And so here I've set that to the smear amount. And so that's nice, that'll bring a little bit of an organic vibe. Velocity is mapped to volume, that's the default setting anyway. I've also dialed in a little bit of random per note on the subvert amount over here. So that'll just be different for different notes. Every time there's a note, you know, an amount will be dialed in up to the maximum amount set here. And then you can also use the main ADSR envelope or a secondary, so that's this envelope, right? Or a secondary one, which you can set the ADSR values for here. Stuff like that. Mod wheel, polyphonic aftertouch, key tracking, and MIDI CC. So again, you basically drag to assign. So if I drag this, let's say to this strike knob, then it'll pop up here, a little thing where you can dial in the amount. And you drag to do that. And then here, you drag to adjust the CC number. Okay, and we can, you know, assign these to more than one thing at a time as well. So that's the modulation. Let's jump to a different example. So again, I'm going to tap here, low polysynth, load with samples. So this I sampled from low polysynth, which I did a video on here the other day. So let's just have a little play with what we can do with this sound-wise. I'll also just look quickly at the samples thing here. So here, you can set the root note for your sample. Now it will identify it, but it might be wrong. I had most of the stuff I put into it, it got it right. This one sample I put in and I felt the root note was definitely off, but then it's handy because you can adjust the root note here, right? And you also have like a fine adjust for pitch and sense. So you will be able to get it to whatever you want, right? And you have a few different playback modes. So, you know, you can load more than one sample at a time in this, right? And apparently drag and drop works. I haven't actually tried it on iOS. I don't know if it works on iOS. It definitely works on desktop. Or you can just, add a sample here. And so then if you have more than one sample, which I haven't experimented yet with, you can stack those, right? So they'll both be played. Or you can have that round robin thing, or another thing called scanning. And again, this is something I just haven't gone into. And I don't have time at the moment, guys. I'm super busy in the run up to Christmas and got a lot of shit going on. So I almost didn't make this video today, but I'm covering most of the stuff that it can do here. So yeah, a few important controls there. Time sample start, time sample end, volume, pitch adjust, range end. It can do a little bit of auto trimming and stuff as well. There's also a reverse sample feature there. So let's just go back in and play around a little bit. So let's try a few of these different modes. Put the grain count up. Let's bring the filter down a little bit. Let's put in a little bit of that ripple and maybe a bit of this smear. Then turn that volume up. Okay, let's try another one. Now, of course, we could also change the envelope here, either manually or just adjusting these. It's probably be nice with a pad envelope. Yeah. Sample scanning, I don't actually remember seeing that mentioned in the manual. Radiate. Bring in some of the cross modulation there. That's now sounding quite like that Piano Tech singular sample, actually. A note that subvert is not working here. By the way, that reflect one doesn't seem to allow you to do MPE pitch bends. It's probably, to do with the way it operates. I don't know. Subvert not working in this one. Strike's an option. And submerge is an option. Now, let's jump through a few of the factory presets. I'm gonna go for some of these pad ones. Or maybe key ones. See what this is like, texture. I'll just trigger these from the keyboard for a minute. Okay. Let's turn this up. One thing I really wish is that it had forward and backwards buttons for navigating presets. It's such a pain in the ass not to have those. I really do love it when apps have those. And I mean, it's the norm, Everything should have forward and backwards buttons for navigating presets. So a lot of it is definitely a very specific aesthetic. So these are made by Blank Forms. I like the vibe. It's a very kind of reminds me a little bit of Boards of Canada and stuff. Now note some of these don't have samples associated with them. So here it's just going to change the settings, but it's going to use whatever sample was loaded there. That's nice. This just looks different, because of the subvert button setting, I think. Yeah. Nice. So you get the idea there, guys, right? Pretty cool. I think you could definitely cook up some nice sounds with this. So I've mentioned a couple of things in this video. Let me see. I made a little list of a few pointers, just so I could make sure that I didn't forget anything. So yeah, what I would like to see is ability to load this in an effect slot to be able to record into it, right? That would be so useful. I mentioned also that pressure messages work fine in this for MPE, but I was not able to get CC74 messages working per note when I had MPE pitched on, or sorry, MPE switched on. As I also mentioned, be careful when tweaking this. I found a few things that really gave a kind of distorted or, pushed me into the red as well. So be careful and maybe use a limiter after it. As I mentioned, the pitch detection, I mean, I've only tried this with a few different things. I found it mostly accurate. Sometimes once I had to adjust things manually, but it was easy enough to do in there. By the way, you can see here, this is one with multiple samples loaded, right? Also, forgot to mention earlier, for each sample, you can set its range, right? The start and end for that particular sample. So, this first sample is going from C0 to C2. And this one, for example, is G3 to C4. Yeah. So that's good, right? It has that, obviously. You need that. Oh, yeah. So another thing I noticed was when I went into the Reflect engine, I was trying to get a sample to loop. And then oh, that's strange. This one's gone up to 16 seconds. There was another sample that I loaded, and it was a rhythmic sample. And this length slider wasn't going up any higher than 5.05 seconds. And it was a bit short for my sample. So I wonder why that happened. Maybe it's probably something, maybe it did some auto trimming. So I don't know. Yeah, it looks like it can actually load long samples, so that's good. That was probably some error on my side. I was going to say I thought that maybe the maximum sample time was a little bit short, but seems not, since I see that can go up to 16 seconds. Another thing I'll mention is, if you have something loaded and if you if you're trying to adjust these, I found with rhythmic sample, when I had it set to a free rate and I was trying to dial things in exactly to get things to loop properly, um, when it was set to length in seconds, I found that the visualization here of the waveform, it just was not very accurate. And I found I had a lot of difficulty getting things right there. I really had to keep trying to get my loop right. And I felt that if I had a more accurate visual representation of it, it would have made things a lot easier. So those are my only criticisms, but I do really like what I've seen of this so far. It seems like a really fun tool. Let me know what you think in the comments, everyone. Hope this was useful for you, and have a great day or evening, whatever time zone you're in. Take care.